Hi, this is Monk from Liquid Hearth, and I'm here with Chakki and EK0p, here with an interview after Season 6, Day 2 of ESGN Fight Nights. First of all, EK0p, congrats for the win. How are you feeling?
Well, I'm feeling amazing, and yeah, I just won twice in a row, which is awesome. Shaman was going strong, 5 wins in a row after, and I would have probably won the sixth game as well if it wasn't for my horrible misplays that I made. I was feeling way too overconfident in that third Shaman game of the second season, and yeah, but at least my warrior was able to pull it off in the mirror matchup.
Chakki, how are you feeling as the second place runner-up of the series?
I feel like you and EK0p used that too much, but yeah, feeling pretty bad, I guess. I had some rough luck, but I think I also made some misplays, so there's room for improvement.
Okay, so let's start with the first game. It was a Shaman versus Shaman mirror. I felt the one difference between the two decks is that EK0p's deck was a bit more solid all around, while your deck ran a bit more situational cards such as BGH and the Black Knight, and even to some extent the Lava Burst, which you had to kind of match it up against the Fire Elementals in the game. Do you think that impacted the result of the final game?
I think the BGH was obviously a blank, but no, I don't think it did, actually. I think it was more just my misplays in the early phase of the game that really cost me the game.
So what do you think was the turning point of the game where it seemed kind of even in the middle? When do you think the game started turning towards EK0p's favor?
When it started turning towards his favor completely was when he just drew his second Azure Drake, and then following that, I think he drew his second Fire Ellie, and I hadn't seen mine yet, and I mean, that was really when he just took over the game.
I thought one of the biggest, in my opinion, one of the biggest turning points was when you used the second Lightning Storm, which allowed him to extend, pretty much overextend and extend as much as he wanted to throughout the whole board. EK0p, I think you only ran one Lightning Storm in your deck, correct? No, two? All right, so did you think you had an advantage in the mirror going into it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, those cards like Wild Pyromancer as well can do so much work potentially if you are able to set up some good Pyromancers. They are almost like a Lightning Storm by themselves and don't hurt you because you have your Healing Totem. And yeah, I mean, overall, also I feel pretty confident play skill-wise with the Shaman. I will probably, as long as I am not like super cocky, I will not make any mistakes with the Shaman. And yeah, I mean, I know this Shaman by heart. It's my favorite class, which you might have noticed because I was playing so blazingly fast, in my opinion, and with the exception of 1 or 2 turns. I just know the deck by heart. It's my favorite class, and that's why I win most of the times with Shaman.
In game 2, I kind of felt it was a similar story. You had let's start with the starting hands. I felt you had a pretty good starting hand with Backstab, Loot Hoarder, and SI Agent, but it seemed like he had a counter to everything you had. Earth Shock to the Loot Hoarder and the Rock Biter to the SI Agent. And it started going a little downhill from there. How did the start feel for you?
So when I saw the hand, I thought it was fairly solid. The Loot Hoarder is your preferable 2-drop, and the Backstab into SI is pretty good when you're on the play. And I got to use it on Nat Pago, which was okay. I mean, he got a draw from it, so in the end I still came out behind, but it was, it was all right. He just happened to have, the answers that he needed to deal with it.
I felt similarly to game 1, you had a lot of cards that were good if you were winning, such as the Dark Iron Dwarves and the Defenders of Argus, but you kept drawing those cards without an actual board. Do you find it's a common occurrence that you win more with the deck if you're already winning, and you kind of lose more if you're already losing?
Right. It's an aggressive deck, so you do want to, have the early board through cards like Backstab and SI Agent. Just unfortunately that game, I had to use those cards on a Nat Pago who had already drawn, so I didn't really gain board control through that. I just had to, stop the bleeding with those cards.
EK0p, were you ever worried that he might get the advantage back? I know in one turn he played a Dark Iron Dwarf, and you didn't have much to deal with it. Were you worried that he would snowball with that Dark Iron Dwarf that you couldn't deal with?
I was always pretty confident that I would have been able to win this game after the start that I had. Rogue has to get ahead pretty early in order to close the game out, but yeah, like in the end, this 8-4 Dark Iron Dwarf did some damage, put me to 12 or something, but I had the answers ready. And yeah, after that, I just closed it out with a couple of taunts and smashed him a couple of times in the face, and then that was it. Because the problem with the Rogue deck is if you don't stay ahead early, the Cold Bloods will not do anything, and you will just not be able to deal as much damage as you want to. And Shaman is the best class, or one of the best classes to deal with early aggression, which is why I was pretty well suited in this matchup.
So in game 3, Shaman versus Warrior, most people see that as slightly favoring towards the Shaman, but actually, in my opinion, it's pretty even. Was there a reason you picked that as the third class, or did you also think that it was a lot in the Shaman's favor?
Desperation. I think my team and I all agreed that the Rogue had a better chance of taking on the Shaman, and I think that game just kind of. I don't think I really made too many mistakes, and I think he just had, the right cards for the situations, and I fell too far behind. As far as picking the Warrior third, I knew that, my decks probably wouldn't sweep him, so I figured I should take out the Shaman with my Rogue if I can, and then the Warrior was kind of the last resort.
All right. Well, ECOP, you actually lost that game. Did you really want to sweep the third game, or were you okay with taking the series with the last two decks?
No, I definitely picked the Shaman in order to go 3-0 like I did this previous season. Yeah, Shaman is able to pull it off against any deck. Unfortunately, I was too overconfident. I didn't think enough about the plays I could do. Did some mistakes. More than one, obviously, and I got punished for it. For example, when I played the Hex on the Baron Geddon, or where I kind of wasted my Argent Commander. Sometimes mistakes happen to the best players. I'm no exception, and I definitely deserve to lose this game. I will not complain about anything. I could say he drew all his late game drops in the first 15 cards, and but. He deserved to win because I made several mistakes.
All right. And the fourth and final game, the Warrior Mirror. Before we even start talking about the game, I kind of want to talk about the decks involved in that game. They were very similar except for a few cards off. I believe, Chakki, you ran 2 Frothing Berserkers and 1 Execute, and ECOP ran 2 Executes and 2 Faceless. Now, knowing that, first of all, Chakki, do you think you were favored in the Mirror?
I think my deck was slightly favored. And the draw I had, with the way it played out, I think I was very heavily favored at some points to win the game. And the reason for the 1 Execute and, the Berserkers and things like that, the Warrior was intended to be one of my anti-aggro decks with a few ways to beat the control matchup. The 1 Execute can come in, but ideally I had it to, shut down some decks like Hunter and Murlocs and such.
All right, unfortunately, you didn't run into any of those decks, but I thought it still looked pretty good. Now, ECOP, what do you think about the 2 Faceless Manipulators, and did you think you were favored going into the match?
Well, I built this Warrior deck in order to beat other control decks pretty easily, especially with those 2 Faceless Manipulators, and I definitely think I was favored in the Control Warrior Mirror matchup because of those 2 Faceless Manipulators and having more late game stuff. Those mid-game minions, like Frothing Berserker, usually don't play a big role because I can handle them pretty easily. Unfortunately, I didn't draw my small removal, like Shield Slam, like Whirlwind, like Slam or Cleave or whatever. Had I drawn some of those, the game would have been much easier for me. However, Frothing Berserkers going unanswered can deal significant amount of damage, as you have seen. However, I still was able to pull it off in the end.
All right. Chakki, I have to ask you, you're mostly known as an aggro player. How much experience do you actually have with the Warrior deck? Because I felt in some cases you might have not made the best play, such as using the Execute on, I think it was like Shield Slam and Execute on a Cairn.
Right.
Or on a Blaine.
Yeah, so for this event, we had to each have at least 5 decks of 5 different classes prepared, and I don't think there are many players that are extremely comfortable with 5 classes. So, Warrior was one of the classes that I didn't have as much experience with as my other decks. And I mostly picked it up based off what I thought the metagame would kind of be and to cover my other deck's weaknesses. I definitely have some inexperience with the deck and feel I made some mistakes in the game.
All right. Very good answer. Now I have to move on to the sort of RNG that apparently people think might have caused the game to swing from one side to the other. First, I'm going to go to Chakki and ask, did you really think you had a really huge advantage, and how confident were you in the middle of the game where you had those huge berserkers and you're hitting them for so much damage?
I wouldn't say I was that confident because I haven't played this matchup very much, and I was sort of unsure of my strategy. But looking back, I went for a really kind of calculated aggression because I figured that was the only way I was going to win with the hand I had. And, without really doing the math, I think I would have put my chances at about 80% in that game, but the 20% happened with some of the RNG effects.
Now, EK0p, I know you have some comments about the RNG that happened. What do you think?
Well, I think you can see it in 2 ways. You can see it like most people that I got lucky by top decking certain answers and stuff. But I honestly think that people don't consider the fact that not having those cards in a certain amount of time is actually like more relevant. Like the being unlucky is more prevalent most of the time, because like imagine, for example, I had 10 cards left in my deck where I needed to draw the Shield Slam against the Grommash, and yeah, I mean I went. It was 20% or what, right? And but think about like how much more RNG it is to get a Pagel in your opening hand, which is like almost always insane. And that chance of getting like something like that is even less likely, which is why I don't understand why people complain about top decks, like those calculated top decks that I did in several parts of the game, when there are RNG parts of the game that are pretty much unnoticed and people don't complain about. I mean, people always complain about the obvious, like, oh, Pagel drew a card, oh, Thinkmaster got a 1/1, but they never like factor in the amount of times where something doesn't get top decked or something doesn't get drawn throughout the whole game, something doesn't work out like it should work out. I mean, RNG in card games, it will always be there, and people should just stop complaining about it and focus more on the skill and the deck building, because that's mostly where the wins are.
Very well said. Now, we know the next match is going to be Nyx versus Forsen. Can the two of you please give some predictions for the match?
I'm not sure. I don't know what decks Nyx is running, and I actually only know like 2 of Forsen's classes. I'd have to check. So based off that, like my lack of knowledge, I'm not sure. But I think it could go either way.
And predictions?
Nyx will win for sure. I mean, I'm pretty confident in his skill, and yeah, he might have missed lethal last season, but it didn't really matter, and I think he's pretty confident right now, and he will take it home. I mean, I feel very confident in his play style, in his play skill, and yeah, overall I think Forsen, he's also a good player, however his decks are pretty questionable. At least they have been in the last season, and this time I don't think it will be any different. So I'm not actually scared of him having the better decks. I'm not scared of him being the better player as well. I think Nyx is a phenomenal player, and he will take this home.
All right, and finally, any shout-outs or sponsor plugs or anything?
Shout out to Team Mana Grind, obviously, and shout out to Kit Kats for the Warrior deck.
Hi, Kit Kats.
Shout out to Alakir, shout out to Ragnaros, shout out to Thinkmas, and shout out to Pagel, and shout out to my good friend Mr. Dong for making this interview happen.
All right, thanks for the interview.